welcome back. I'm so excited y'all could be here today. I know that there was a little bit of a break for me recently. We've just had a lot going on at our house, so I had to step back a little bit. But I am back and we are here and we're going to talk about another true crime case that was very interesting to me. I will open with saying that this is a huge trigger warning. We will be talking about assault in many forms as well as torture. And sometimes the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree when it comes to family. Today we're going to talk about a woman who killed for money and followed in the footsteps of her uncle, which was not really someone that you want to follow in the footsteps of. Suzanne Basso was born in Schenectady, New York, to Florence Garrow and John Burns on May 15, 1954. If her mother's name sounds familiar, that's because her younger brother was the horrible man that we talked about in our last video, Robert Garrow. Suzanne was one of 8 children in the Burns family, and she was the youngest of 3 girls. There was knowledge of the family being physically and sexually abusive towards the children. On one occurrence, Florence found Suzanne smoking. Instead of making her smoke the whole entire pack of cigarettes, which was bad enough, she apparently made her eat the whole pack. In this age, this was not uncommon to make your kids smoke the whole pack or other punishment. I mean, there's stories in my family of grandparents being found smoking and made to smoke the whole pack or things like that. But it is what they thought. Oh, well, if you smoke them all, you're not going to want them. They're disgusting. Is any of these stories true? No idea. But this didn't prevent smoking either. It may have even helped to build the addiction in these children. Suzanne got married in the early 1970s to a Marine named James Peake. Like most military families, they did not move slowly in starting a family. And in 1973, they had a daughter, and in 1974, they welcomed a son. This family life proved to also be very dysfunctional. And in 1982, James was arrested for molesting his own daughter and taking indecent liberties with children. The couple stayed together, however, which I'm sure was great for their daughter and her mental health. And in 1990, the family decided to rebrand themselves. They adopted the identity of an Irish-American family and changed their last name from Peake to O'Malley. They then moved to Houston, Texas, and while in Houston, Suzanne got a job as an apartment complex security guard. The move to Houston would prove to be the last straw for James and Suzanne, and in 1993, she met, fell in love with, and moved into her home a man named Carmine Basso. Carmine owned a security company called Latin Security and Investigations Corp. Carmine was from New Jersey, and he would soon move into the family's home, as I've stated before. But he didn't just move in with Suzanne and the 2 children. He moved in with Suzanne, James, and the 2 children. So she has her husband, her boyfriend, and her 2 children all living in the home together. And they would live this way for a while. But James eventually did move out and get his own apartment. And despite not actually being married or even being able to get married to Carmine, as she was already married to James and never divorced him, she ended up taking Carmine's last name and began to refer to him as her husband. They remained together until his death in 1997. Louis Musso was a man who was living his life in Cliffside Park, New Jersey. He was living in an assisted living home in 1998 when he met Suzanne. He had been married and had a son until his wife passed away of cancer. He was 58 years old and he was working at ShopRite as a bagger. If you don't know what a ShopRite is just a big name grocery store. And so he was just bagging groceries and living his best life. He was mentally handicapped, which is why he was living in the assisted living home, and he received Social Security disability to help him. He was financially independent at the time, so he was paying all of his bills, he was taking care of himself, he was grocery shopping for himself. He was just living in the assisted living home so that he had that support system. He was attending a church carnival when he came across Suzanne, who was 43 years old at the time. Apparently, Suzanne must have been a looker because he was attracted to her right away. They started spending time together and talking and continued their long distance relationship when Suzanne went back to Texas. He was said to have had the mental capacity of a 7 to 10-year-old, according to his family. And in June of 1998, Louis moved from New Jersey to Handicaps City, Texas, where he moved in with Suzanne. I am assuming, but there was no concrete evidence of this, that he was that she was in New Jersey, probably for the death of Carmine, maybe for a funeral or something, as he was originally from New Jersey. While in New Jersey, Louis had his Social Security set up with a payee, and this man was Al Becker. Al had been friends with Louis for 20 years, and so it was just right that he would have him as a payee to make sure that if something happened where Louis was incapacitated and could no longer financially take care of himself, he had that extra support system with Al. So once he moved to Texas, Al, who again had been friends with him for 20 years, who was a payee for his Social Security, who was his support system, could no longer get a hold of Louis. And very, very often, and could no longer get a hold of Louis very often. And eventually, Suzanne restricted all communication altogether. Al did try to reach out to resources in Texas to get in contact with Louis, but this was all to no avail. Louis and Suzanne continued to live with each other, and in July, Suzanne attempted to have her made the payee of Louis's Social Security. She took out a $65,000 life insurance policy for Louis and named herself the beneficiary. This was not the only policy that she had taken out on Louis, but it may have been the weirdest one. This policy stated that it was for if Louis died of a violent death. I don't know any reason that I or any other spouse or any other family member or any other carer would take out a life insurance policy just in the event that they suffered a violent death. That seems very odd and just, I don't know, off, I guess. In these policies and his rewritten will, Suzanne was listed as his wife-to-be, which, as we already know, is not possible, as she is still married to James. The will left Suzanne everything in his estate, and his behavior was very concerning to those who knew Louis well. Suzanne began to bring Louis around her friends and family, to include her son, James O'Malley, Bernice Aarons, Craig and Hope Aarons, who were Bernice's son and daughter, and Hope's fiance, Terrence Singleton. These were people that she spent most of her time with, and so it was just right that she would bring around the person that she also was spending a lot of time with, and is her husband-to-be. As time went on, things began to change. On August 27th, 1997, Suzanne started calling friends and family and the police, stating that Louis had run away, possibly with a woman that he met at the laundromat who was of Mexican heritage, And on August 28th, his body was actually found. After he was found, he was taken to the medical examiner, and upon examination, I will pause right now and let you know that it will get graphic from this point on. And this is where we're really going to talk about everything that I had warned in the beginning. We're going to talk about torture and assault in many ways. I apologize, but there is no way to not talk about it and still talk about this case. So, trigger warning again. Upon examination, the medical examiner found many injuries to Louis. They found hundreds of bruises of different ages on his body, from head to toe. They concluded that the bruising and subsequent torture all happened within the span of 5 days leading up to his death. He had bruises on his hands and feet, lash marks on his back, a black eye that resulted in a skull fracture, and this was thought to be caused by a blow to the back of the head. He had a broken nose, broken ribs, and burn marks similar to cigarettes or a hot poker on his back. They also found skin abrasions from harsh chemicals all over his body. None of this is what ended his life, though. Louis lost his life due to 18 to 19 blows to the head from an X-shaped object that caused skull fractures. The investigation began into the murder of Louis, and the police quickly found that he had been seen weeks before his death with bruises and a black eye. When he was asked about this, Suzanne told the police that he had been beaten up by some Mexicans. I am not trying to be racially rude when I say that. This is literally what she told them. And she didn't just tell police this, she told other people this. Anyone who asked, this is what she said. Due to Suzanne inserting herself into the case by filing the missing persons report for Louis, the police quickly turned their investigation to Suzanne. The police brought her in for questioning, and she admitted that she and her friends would make Louis clean their homes and do work around the houses, and she admitted to driving Bernice's car with Louis's body in the trunk to the site where her son, J.D. O'Malley, Terrence, and Craig would dump the body. But she said she had nothing to do with his murder. She also admitted to driving the car to a dumpster where she disposed of other evidence, including rubber gloves and dirty clothes. Police continued to question her, and she then admitted that she knew that her son and his friends had been abusing Louis for at least a day before his murder. So you know that these people are abusing this poor man who's mentally handicapped, and you do nothing. You sit by, you let it happen. That's terrible. They found the items that were disposed of, and they began to bring others in for questioning. Hope Aarons was an amazing asset in this case, and when they brought her in, she sang. She told the police that on August of 1998, Suzanne and JD brought Louis to the apartment that her family shared. At this time, upon his arrival, he had 2 black eyes, to which he claimed, and Suzanne backed this theory up, that he had received them from some Mexicans when he went for a walk. She went on to say that once they were in the apartment, Suzanne made Louis sit on a red and blue mat in the hallway of the apartment, alternating between being on his hands and knees and just his knees. So what I'm imagining, what I'm picturing, and it's because I have kids, is those mats that you use like in schools or in daycare, and they're like that foam, and they're always red and blue. Like, let's be honest, they sell them at Walmart now. But I'm imagining that just sitting in the hallway of this apartment, and this poor 50-some-year-old man who's mentally handicapped just spending all of his time sitting on it on his hands and knees. And that's terrible. They ended up spending the whole entire weekend in this apartment. And when they arrived, Luis was in clean clothes and he only had his 2 black eye injuries. But this was quickly going to change. The next part of what I'm going to talk to you about is very graphic, and again, I apologize in advance. Please be aware that we will be talking about torture and severe abuse at this point. At some point in the weekend, Suzanne began to slap Luis. JD, or James, would join in and was kicking him with his boots. Luis begged and asked and pled for them to stop. And at this point, JD stopped. But when he did, he was questioned by Suzanne as to why he stopped. Suzanne then hit Luis over the head with a baseball bat. JD responded to her and said that he stopped because he wanted to take his boots off. She hit him with a belt, a vacuum cleaner, and even jumped on top of him multiple times. Suzanne, at this point in her life, weighed over 300 pounds. And that's a significant amount of weight to jump onto a person with, especially multiple times. This beating and torture, I believe, was not the original plan for the weekend. I base that on certain facts. Suzanne still had to go to work while they were there. I feel like if she knew that she was going to spend the weekend beating somebody to death, she would have taken off work. But I could be wrong. When she left for work, she instructed the others to not leave the apartment. They were not allowed to use the phone, and Luis begged more and more to move from the mat. And when he tried to, after being told no, JD would go on to hit him. After the significant abuse that he endured, JD was not done. He took Luis into the bathroom, placed him in the bathtub, and cleaned him using a wire brush and harsh chemicals to remove all evidence. He begged for 911 to be called and was refused by Suzanne. After his passing, they dumped his body and tried to cover it up with a false missing persons report and a web of lies. In June of 1999, a Harris County grand jury indicted Suzanne for murdering Luis during the course of kidnapping or attempting to kidnap him, and for remuneration or the promise of remuneration in the form of insurance proceeds. A Harris County judge found Suzanne guilty of capital murder, and after the jury recommended capital punishment, the court sentenced Suzanne to death. Honestly, she deserved it. Judgment was entered August 23rd, 1999, and Suzanne was not happy. She was not happy about this decision, and she would go on to appeal her ruling many times. In 2003, 2006, 2007, 2009, and 2010, her appeals were all rejected. On February 6, 2014, Suzanne's death sentence was carried out. She was only the 14th woman in the United States to be executed. When she was asked if she had any last words, she said, "No, sir." And as Suzanne was executed by lethal injection in Texas, she had no last meal. Texas no longer grants last meal requests, and therefore she had a regular prison supper. At 6:26 p.m., she was pronounced dead. As for her accomplices, I didn't forget about them. James, her son, was sentenced to time. I'm not really sure how much time. I'm assuming it's 80 to life because that's about what everyone else will get if as I carry on. But he was sentenced to time at Hodge Unit State Prison for Men, and he still resides there to this day. Craig Aarons was convicted of 60 years at Ferguson Unit. Terrence Singleton was convicted to life at Ferguson Unit. Hope Aarons had a hung jury, but she took a plea deal in exchange for her testimony against Suzanne, and she received 20 years. She has since been released. Bernice Aarons, or Bernice Miller, received 80 years at Hobby Unit, which is a women's prison in Texas. This woman lured a man with a mental handicap to move states away from all of his friends and family, from a life that he knew and was thriving in a ruse of love and commitment, only for her to take advantage of him, abuse him, and torture him, and attempt to steal from him. This was all done for financial gain and possibly due to the group violence mentality. None of the people in this case had a police history of violence, and somehow they were all motivated to kill a man that could barely stand up for himself. They stole the life of an innocent man of their own selfish gain and disregard for human life. And she spent days torturing a man for her own reward. Everyone in this case did end up getting prison time, and that is proper, as they did torture a man to death for literally no reason. If you have thoughts, questions, concerns, please leave them down in the comments. If you have any cases that you would like me to deep dive into and discuss, please also leave those in the comments, or head on over to my Discord where you can share your thoughts. Thank you all for being here. I know this case was a tough one and it should have never happened. He had so many people who were looking out for his best interest and well-being until he met Suzanne, and she lured him across the country. That being said, I hope you all have a great week. Have a great rest of your day. Eat your veggies, drink your water, and be amazing. Also, don't be Suzanne, and choose good people to look up to. All right, bye.